Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Assalamu alaikum. Welcome to Newsroom. I'm your host, Khalid. Today is the 21st of September 2022, and these are the stories that we will be discussing in detail during the course of the show. We'll begin, ladies and gentlemen, with the latest as far as the floods is concerned, especially in the wake of the relief and rehabilitation, and of course, all the diseases also that the people who have been affected by the floods are encountering, whether it be the waterborne diseases, whether it be diseases caused by mosquitoes such as dengue or malaria, whether it be cholera, whether it be so many other diseases, pregnant women who have issues as well because of the lack of proper sanitation or the proper methodologies or the kits for them to deliver, as well as children who are severely affected by these waterborne diseases. This is what we are going to talk about in detail in our first story. Our second story of the day, ladies and gentlemen, concerns the Indian state terrorism, whether it be what happened in Indian illegally occupied Jammu and Kashmir, or whether it happens beyond the held Kashmir Valley within India as well. There is an influx, there is an increase as far as such terrorist activities are concerned, and of course the hapless people, especially the Muslim community within the Indian illegally occupied Jammu and Kashmir Valley and in India, is facing the brunt of it all. Pakistan is highlighting the Kashmir issue at the United Nations General Assembly 77th session, as it has done in the past as well. It says that India is disregarding all rights for humanity and fundamental freedom as far as the Muslims and other minorities are concerned within India, and also it systematically criminalizes political dissent with specific reference to illegally occupied Jammu and Kashmir. This is going to be our second story. Then we will be talking about emotional appeals at the United Nations General Assembly also when it comes to girls' education in Afghanistan. Now there was a plea that was made by one of the girls at the United Nations General Assembly as far as girls' education is concerned, and the demand to reopen girls' schools at the United Nations, that has now gathered momentum also because of this and other speeches that have happened within the ambit of the United Nations. The government of the Afghan Taliban has yet to reopen the educational institutions for girls in the country. Then we'll be talking about Islamophobia, ladies and gentlemen. Nothing new here, but what has been revealed is that around 55% or over 55% of online Islamophobic content originates from India. That has been said in a report that has been published very recently. Of course, we all know about the anti-Muslim sentiment that is present within the Hindu community of India, especially within the BJP government. But the fact that Islamophobic content, when the majority of it generates from within India, is on one hand not surprising, but opens a lot of issues as well for India in the wake of all the humanitarian crisis that it is engulfed in and what it is doing to the Muslims in India. Finally, the International Day of Peace, ladies and gentlemen, is being observed today. The theme for this International Day of Peace today is End Racism and Build Peace. Racism and peace are two very important elements. We've had Abdul Sattar Idhi Sahab, as you can see in the image here, in the parallel window as well, and so many other philanthropists who are working for that exactly, for ending racism and for building peace amongst the different communities, religions and sects. This day is devoted to strengthening the ideals of peace. Let's begin with our first segment, ladies and gentlemen, and that concerns the challenges of rehabilitation after the devastating floods. Water still hasn't receded in all the areas. 1/3 of Pakistan is underwater. Millions and millions of people are now without shelter, without clean water, without proper facilities to cook food, and of course the waterborne diseases are slowly and steadily creeping within those communities. We've been joined by Dr. Rana Jawad Asghar, who's an expert in infectious diseases, to talk about the disease aspect of it all. Dr. Saab, it had been some time that we had discussed in our show and we had you as a guest, so welcome back. I hope you and the family are fine. First of all, Dr. Saab, infectious diseases, was it surprising to you the number of people who are infected with cholera or with other waterborne diseases, dengue, malaria and others? Do you feel the number is going to increase?
Thank you, Omer Saab, for inviting me back to your program. No, I was not surprised, and I will not be surprised if the number of cases goes up. And there are multiple reasons for that. Anyway, after monsoon, the number of those dengue, malaria, typhoid, these cases goes up routinely. But when you add major natural disaster with huge amounts of our land covered with water and people displaced from their homes, that add into the complexities or the number of the cases which are routinely expected, which are a high number of cases in these months. So because a lot of people were out in this monsoon season, this is also the start of dengue season. And we have already seen a number of cases going up in Karachi, in Lahore, and pretty much in Rawalpindi, Islamabad, wherever we have little bit of reporting system. The number which is being reported are still a small number, I think, as compared to what actually is happening, because we don't have a very good reporting system, disease reporting systems. So yes, dengues are already up. Today I was seeing reports of malaria cases going up. We have already reports of people dying because of cholera or gastroenteritis, as many people reported. So there is already, and there is a threat of other diseases too, both vector-borne, like through mosquito or mosquito, and through water-borne, like all the diseases which are transmitted through drinking contaminated water, which is a major issue in that area.
All right, Dr. Saab, when we look at the casualties, the statistics that I have, that 2 people have died of gastroenteritis, 2 of pyrexia, 324 lives have been lost because of different diseases in one province since the 1st of July. 14,619 diarrheal cases have been reported, 15,227 cases of skin-related diseases, 9,201 cases of suspected malaria. And of course, the list goes on and on. Dr. Saab, there are areas that people have access to, that our forces and our different provincial governments and the NGOs are going to. There are others where the access is quite difficult. How can people manage on their own?
So number one, the case numbers you quoted are still, I would say, a lot of, I would say, underreporting of the cases. Because just give you an example, Karachi reported like 100 or 200 cases of dengue. Lahore reported similar numbers, and Rawalpindi. In the cities of that scale, even seasonal dengue cases should be many times more than what they are being reported. So we already knew that we have a problem with our actual numbers and statistics. So we cannot be just content with the low number of cases reported. Because even though the number seems bigger, which you referred to, but if you put the Pakistan population in perspective in that, then it will become pretty much negligible or very small numbers. But the problem is already there. So what I'm advocating after floods is that we need to protect our population for 2 immediate threats. One is the diseases through the contaminated water, and that are apart from gastroenteritis and cholera, typhoid and other diseases, hepatitis A, hepatitis E, all those kind of diseases are
snake bite, other insect bites also, that travels through the water, and especially yes, through waters that have accumulated across Pakistan.
Yes, snake bite is there, but I'm looking at the scale or the threat of a scale of the threat. So the biggest threat we have is from the waterborne diseases.
Of course.
And to address this, we only need clean drinking water. And you don't expect government to put new pipes of clean water and supply those people, but simple giving them chlorine tablets, giving them small thermoses which has filters, small filtration pumps, which are not huge, which are pretty cheap and can easily be transported and given to people so they can use the same dirty water which is around them and make it drinkable. So these things are already available. Just we need to make sure that they are delivered to those populations so they are not infected with those diseases which are transmitted through water. Then the other major problem in this month and next month is dengue, malaria, and chikungunya. All are spread through the mosquitoes, and to control this, we need, again, the government to step in, the provincial health departments, or the federal government to provide them mosquito repellents, sprays, or whatever is required to control the spread of mosquitoes in that area. If we just cover these 2 things, just 2 things, we can easily reduce the threat of infectious diseases to 70% lesser. So it means that if we just focus on two of those primary areas, we can decrease the threat of any major outbreak. The second thing which you have mentioned, the snake bites, but there is also another problem that nearly 140,000 pregnant women are due
Of
to
course.
deliver babies in these 30 days. And then we have hundreds of thousands of pregnant ladies anyway who are in flood affected area. So providing that service to them is going to be a major task, but we already have a very bad numbers on our infant mortality and our maternal mortality. So a lot of people, a lot of women die while giving delivery to our babies, and a lot of babies dies at the time of the delivery. And we have one of the worst rates in the world. So add on to this complexity, there is much bigger threat of losing life in that process. Then the other thing is mental health issues. And these are, they are not apparent on the screen or on the surface. But
But
if
they
you
will be
dig
evident
deep,
in the weeks and the months to come, Dr. Saab, because of the
exactly.
sheer extent of the devastation that the people are encountered with.
Very true, very true. So we need to focus on all these, but what I would suggest that if the government can prioritize these two activities, ensuring that infectious diseases could spread could be reduced to less than 30% or even lesser, that gives the direction to the relief organization also, government and people, that we need to make sure we drink safe water or provide safe water to them with very simple methods, and also to control the mosquitoes spread or give them repellents, bed nets, whatever is available, so they can be prevented from the mosquito bites. These two things alone can, put us out of threat situation.
Dr. Saab, what about the areas that the people have not been able to access to date? Do you feel the people can do something on their own in order to prevent themselves from disease? Is there something that they can do?
Sorry, I missed which disease you mentioned?
Those areas, Dr. Saab, where the access has been difficult for the
Okay.
people or the forces to bring material or this medicine or the preventive equipment like the sprays, etc., for the mosquitoes. How can the people prevent themselves in those areas, difficult areas?
I think again our rural populations have they develop their own methods to keep away the mosquitoes, and they use smoke to do that. But the problem in these areas is that to find the wet wood which they can burn, or those dry grass which can be used to start a smoke, which will keep away the all the insects away. And I think these are not what I'm asking for, not a huge equipment or huge pieces of equipment. These are very small things which can easily be delivered to the population and are easily to use. Nothing of these things is complicated to use. So I think we need to make an effort to provide those. If you just provide them chlorine tablets and just tell them in 5 minutes how to clean their drinking water, they would be able to do it. But normally we lose focus when we are providing relief work. We are sending them medicines which they are never going to use. We are sending them equipment which will not be used in that area. So the government can do a role of coordination also and tell the
The
donors
equipment
and
of immediate use, and then the equipment
exactly.
that can be used later on. Maybe that equipment or the medicine needs to be divided into two halves, and the one that is most important needs to be given at the earliest. Which brings me to another important question that a lot of people have been asking: of all the diseases that the people can get, waterborne and otherwise, how many are communicable?
Those diseases which I mentioned are not communicable per se. Like if there's a person is of dengue is sitting next to me, I will not get dengue, but they are infectious diseases. And but the mosquito, if mosquito bites me and I'm suffering from dengue, and then later when he bites another person, that way it transmit infection. So that the major diseases which I mentioned are not going to be passed to other person by just sitting in a room, just like COVID. It's not going to be like COVID diseases. But when you put a lot of dengue patients in a population, the mosquitoes which were, let's say, uninfected with dengue before can get infected and spread it to those the population which was uninfected with dengue. So it's not airborne, but it can spread in a population if you do not control the disease quickly.
All right, in order to control the disease properly, correctly, before it spreads and creates havoc, as has also been said by the United Nations, that this could be a second major challenge for Pakistan in the days to come. That is the disease that is slowly and steadily disseminating amongst the public who have been affected by the floods. How important is A, sanitation for this? B, how important is also proper orientation of the people who have been affected by the floods?
The sanitation is critically important. There is nothing more important than learning about sanitation and implementing sanitation. If you have just provide sanitation and clean drinking water, you can get rid of all infectious diseases up to maybe 80–90%, and your hospital beds will be empty. So that's how important it is. But unfortunately, it's not practiced. So I would say that the public who is suffering from this situation, it's hard to tell them that you need to have a very clean area or space because they are living in makeshift tents. But whatever you can do to make sure your surrounding is clean and that your waste is properly being disposed somewhere a little further from your place, that will protect them from getting those nasty infectious diseases. So as we say, the cleanliness is part of our religion, our iman. So similarly, in public health, cleanliness, sanitation is critically important for your health also.
Dr. Saab, the WHO has also taken certain guidelines out as far as those people who have been affected, who are in flood-prone areas, on how to deal with the contaminated water or the flood water, and how to, of course, prevent oneself from communicable diseases or the water-borne diseases. This said, how important is the collaboration, because I was talking of the United Nations, how important is the collaboration with the United Nations, with the other friendly countries and the different partners that are coming with aid to Pakistan? How important is that aid to also reach the affected people at the earliest?
All of us who are watching this on the flood situation on television, we cannot comprehend the scale of the problem. Everyone who has gone to the flood affected area, and I have seen previous floods also, once you go there, your perspective changes. And that's why United Nations Secretary General said this, that I'm doing work in humanitarian crisis for last 32 years. But I have never seen the scale of this natural disaster in my professional life. That shows you how big is this, the problem which we are facing. And Pakistan or any other country cannot face or address this major challenge on their own. This is not just about Pakistan. This is, globally it's being accepted that Pakistan is going through a crisis which in recent history we have never seen anywhere in the world. So that's why it's very critically important that the United Nations, through their member countries, and we all work as a member of United Nations, work together because today it's Pakistan and tomorrow it could be other country. So we have to not only, with partners, address the immediate needs of our flood affected population, but working with the global partners, we need to think about for the future also, how we can secure our population in a future in which major floods are expected due to the climate change. So that's going to be collaboration, international collaboration is needed, and its need has already been understood. The only thing is now that as a country we also unite, that currently the most #1 priority in the country should be to help our flood affected regions, people who are there, and how to get out of this natural crisis. This is not a small thing, and many people are not realizing this.
That is so true. Finally, Dr. Saab, how long and arduous is the road ahead for Pakistan to rebuild itself, to rehabilitate itself from this spate of disease, from this spate of flood, from this spate of destruction?
It's a very hard path and it's a very difficult path, but Pakistani nation is a resilient nation, so I expect that we will come out of it. But I think we need to start thinking as a nation. We should not, think about our country. At this moment, we should unite the way we have united in the past when an enemy attacked our country. So that kind of unity is required at this moment because the crisis to the nation is much bigger than any previous wars which the Pakistan faced. But it's a different type of crisis, but it's much more dangerous crisis. So we all need to work together, put our political differences on one side and try to focus how we can bring in all our capabilities and make sure that not only Pakistan comes out of this current problem, but also built in a way that we are better protected for the future natural disasters which are expected because of the climate change.
All right. Thank you very much, Dr. Rana. Jawad Asghar, expert in infectious diseases, to have talked to us about the impact of disease on the flood-hit population across Pakistan and the fact that we need to be one and work as one when it comes to helping Pakistan come out of this very crucial and critical state. It is an enemy that has engulfed us, and that enemy is climate change. We need to fight climate change on different levels, and this is what Pakistan is doing through its governments, through its armed forces, through its NGOs, and through those people who are those philanthropists who are doing things on their own. Let's come to our second segment, and that second segment concerns Indian illegally occupied Jammu and Kashmir and Indian state terrorism. That is not abating, that is not stopping, that is not pausing. We hear stories every single day. We hear of atrocities every single day. There's a delegation of the APHC that is currently talking to international leaders about these very atrocities that are being committed to the hapless people in illegally occupied Jammu and Kashmir. More in the following report.
India is continuously violating all international laws and conventions in Indian illegally occupied Jammu and Kashmir and is using black laws like Public Safety Act and Unlawful Activities Prevention Act to arrest innocent Kashmiris. In Indian illegally occupied Jammu and Kashmir, Indian troops launched a cordon and search operation in Ramban district of Jammu region. According to Kashmir Media Service, the operation was launched by a joint team of police, Special Operation Group and Indian Army in area near Ghul. Pakistan has strongly condemned the arbitrary arrests and illegal detention of prominent Islamic scholars, including Maulana Abdul Rashid Daudi, Maulana Mushtaq Ahmed Wairi, and 5 members of Jamaat-e-Islami in Indian illegally occupied Jammu and Kashmir. The Modi-led fascist Indian government revoked Kashmir's special status and flagrant violation of international laws in August 2019 and is settling non-Kashmiris in the territory against United Nations resolutions. India must be punished for violating global laws and agreements in Indian illegally occupied Jammu and Kashmir, and United Nations is morally bound to help resolve the lingering Kashmir dispute as per its resolutions and aspirations of Kashmiri people. Illegally detained All Parties Hurriyat Conference Chairman Masarrat Alam Butt and other senior leaders have expressed the hope that the United Nations during its ongoing 77th General Assembly session in New York will come up with a viable formula for final settlement of disputes like Indian illegally occupied Jammu and Kashmir to lay a strong foundation for a peaceful world.
Safiullah Khan Ghauri, who is a political analyst, joins us online. Safi, thank you very much to have joined us. Safi, there is no end to the atrocities that are being committed on the hapless people in illegally occupied Jammu and Kashmir, is there? And now, of course, adding to all of this is the continued and prolonged illegal detention of the Kashmiri political prisoners in the held valley. This and so much more is happening in the Indian held valley. We understand the mute behavior from the world bodies, but can the Kashmiri people and the Kashmiri leaders do something to highlight these atrocities at different international level to generate a response?
Thank you very much for having me, Omer. I am just as stunned as you are when we talk about the kind of atrocities that are taking place in India on a daily basis. Now, this arrest of the scholars marks a new low in what India would do, because we've previously spoken about how they've arrested Muslim journalists, how they've arrested Muslim activists. But when it comes to these scholars, it's interesting because they have been arrested under the Public Safety Act, but so far, no grounds have been given as to why they've been arrested, and no charges have been laid down. So they're just in jail, and according to the Public Safety Act, which is in itself a very draconian law that India has, they can be detained like this for 2 years. And this is absolutely atrocious because, I cannot imagine as a lawyer such a law. I mean, the fact is that.
But Safi, can something be done as far as laws such as the PSA or the UAPA are concerned? Can some kind of judicial action be taken against those, or is the Indian government, it can do whatever it wants as it has been doing concerning these laws?
Obviously, within India, it's the government which makes the laws, and I don't think that any action that they would try and take would succeed, for the simple reason that it's Indian law, and Indian law is atrocious like that. I mean, I will bring to your attention an incident of last year when 127 Muslims were acquitted after a trial of 19 years. 19 years of constant suffering, and finally the courts held that, oh, these people were innocent all along. But for 19 years they had to suffer through the rigors of trial. Now, when it comes to draconian laws like this, of course, we cannot expect anything to happen from the Indian judicial system, for the simple reason that the Indian Supreme Courts also seem to bow down to the general will of the government. There is this entire concept now of Hindutva, which is very different from.
You say the Indian Supreme Court bows down to the Indian government. Is the judiciary being used as a tool by the Indian government for against the minorities, especially Muslims?
I think just like Pakistan, there are different judiciaries that go through various ebbs and flows. Now, in the Indian judiciary, which frankly, in my opinion, used to give phenomenal judgments that were so good that we would quote them here in the courts of Pakistan, judgments that I know that my Bangladeshi friends would quote in the courts in Bangladesh, are now giving the stupidest judgments imaginable. And as a result, they're losing their own worth, their own value. And this is going to continue. Now, coming back to your original question as to what can be done on an international scale, it's very interesting. We've discussed this before as well, Omer, and it continues to elude me as to why, despite, of course, the fact that Pakistan is putting in due effort, we are unable to sensitize the global community on how important this matter is. So, for instance, in the last UN General Assembly session, the one friend country which raised the issue, which raised the problem of Article 370 in India, was Turkey. This time around, Tayyip Erdogan did mention Kashmir. He did give lip service to Kashmir, but without mentioning who was at fault. Instead, blaming both India and Pakistan, both stating that both these countries have not been able to come to peace, so Kashmiris should come to peace. It's very nice that somebody's still mentioning it, but the fact is that now the rhetoric that Pakistan had built up with other Arab countries, with friendly countries like Turkey, with Malaysia, all of them are beginning to get toned down. Times like these, Pakistan needs to take an increasingly strong stance to try and sensitize this matter. I think one way to do so would be to take the matter to the International Court of Justice. Not that it would work out, because India would never consent to go there, but Pakistan should try and indulge in all sorts of mechanisms that it has to try and educate not just the Indian people, but also the international legal community, so that this atrocity, this violation of law, first and foremost, should be held up as an example of how the powerful get away with violations of laws, and how laws just do not seem to apply to everyone equally. So I think on that end,
but Safi, the fact remains that you talk about, Pakistan uprising all the international leaders and the international community, and also the people in India, about what is happening to the Indian Muslims, to the Muslims in illegally occupied Jammu and Kashmir. But don't you feel after so many decades that those people that we need to apprise haven't been apprised, or don't understand, or don't know what is happening in the region? Are they so blind or deaf that they can't really understand what is happening?
We have seen how China, despite the fact that China is in a trade war with the USA, despite the fact that it's daggers drawn with the West, it has managed to diplomatically, and through some extremely good statecraft, managed to subdue India and has taken control of the Gogra Hot Springs region, which was a point of contention between both the countries. So I think that our brother country right across the border, we have a lot to learn from them, and we can try and see the kind of tactics they employed. It was both carrot and stick with India. It wasn't just constantly trying to bully Indians. There were of course standoffs. There was of course physical violence as well. But at the same time, they also negotiated with the Indians. They met on the BRICS conference. They met right now at the SCO conference. They tried to court the Indian foreign minister. To that end, I do credit Bilawal Bhutto for going the extra mile. I think that he is making some efforts. We have seen that he is, at least behind the scenes, making some contact with the Indian government. So let's hope for the best. I think a mixture of carrot and stick plus a stronger worldview is the only thing that can really work here.
All right, Safi, also the fact remains that the Indian Sikhs are now, getting together with the international Sikh population across the world in order to forcefully demand the creation of Khalistan, that is the area of within India that consists of the Sikh community. Do you feel this is going to put India or the Indian government in some kind of a pressure-like situation where it might reconsider what it is doing to not only the Sikhs but also the Muslims? Safi, can you hear us? There seems to be some kind of a technical issues due to which our guest Safi cannot hear us properly. Nevertheless, what I was trying to ask him was that the whole referendum that is happening across the world, and of course recently it has happened in Canada as far as the creation of Khalistan, the land for the Sikh community within India is concerned. Will this ever put pressure on India in order to reconsider the way it has been dealing with its minorities, whether it be the Sikh community or of course more specifically the Muslim community within the Indian illegally occupied Jammu and Kashmir? Coming back to the rest of the Indians the Islamic Muslim scholars within India, Pakistan has strongly condemned these arrests and the illegal detentions of these Islamic scholars, including Maulana Abdul Rashid Dawoodi, Maulana Mushtaq Ahmad Veeri, and 5 members of the Jamaat-e-Islami in the Indian illegally occupied Jammu and Kashmir Valley. These, of course, actions are happening just days before the United Nations General Assembly session, and of course, it manifests the whole attitude that India is having as far as its minorities, especially the Muslim communities, is concerned. Safi, the question that I was asking you before we got interrupted due to a technical fault was the way the demand for Khalistan is being made by Sikhs across the world and the Sikhs in India. Do you feel this is going to have some kind of an impact on India to reconsider what it is doing as far as its minorities, its attitude towards its minorities is concerned, especially towards Muslims?
It's an interesting question, and honestly, I do not have an answer for this because the Indian public will eventually determine which way it is going. We are seeing an increased demand within the Indian Hindus to make India a strictly Hindu country. So, whereas the Khalistan movement has a lot of support from the Sikhs, it also seems to have at least a modicum of support from the Hindus who view Sikhs, Muslims, Christians, all of the religions as outsiders. And they want a strict Hindu India. So on that end, we have, of course, this radical element within India. But then we have to keep in mind that India is a land of almost all major religions. I mean, this is a country where majority of the world religions that we know of today were actually formed. Buddhism came from here. And so on the other hand, I also have faith that there are a lot of very reasonable-minded Indians out there who will continue to try and plead for a secular India and a multicultural India.
But Safi, what do you foresee as far as a secular or multicultural India or a pluralistic India is concerned? Is there any hope? Because the way things are going, the way the government is maneuvering itself as far as favoring the Hindus and doing whatever it can so that the Hindus, the Hindu power remains consistent within India and within the Indian held valley. Is there any hope?
So I don't remember. I don't know. Before I got cut off, can you kindly remind me when I got cut off? What I was saying before, because I did sort of answer this the last time I was talking about it. But generally, if I were to try and analyze things, India is at an all-time low. India has record low foreign reserves. India has a record high outflow of the equity market. India is experiencing a record high debt. Now, this is not to just blame India, of course. Pakistan is experiencing similar things. So I don't want to berate our neighbor without looking inwards. But the reality is that when things like these happen, they try and distract the public by creating non-issues. So, for instance, the economic issues that India is facing right now, which are as terrible as can get, the Indian government, instead of addressing those economic issues, is going ahead and arresting religious scholars. Perhaps this is a move to appease some hardline Hindus who would otherwise come out and talk about their economic problems instead. Perhaps this is the reason why they want to do these things, so that they can create unnecessary controversies within the country. We don't know for a fact as to what the government is doing, but what we do know for a fact is that when governments like these have economic problems, they continue to use bigger and more radical measures to try and rile the public up in their favor by creating divisions between religions, between castes, between sects, and between individual persons, so that they get distracted from what the real issues are. And the real issues in India are facing them. I think it's very obvious what they are going through right now, and also the fact that we have this increased standoff in Russia and the West today. I think for a very long time, India was given a blank check by the United States to continue to import oil and wheat from Russia. After today's speech by Putin, I don't think that's going to happen anymore. India will have to take a clear side. Either it will be on the Russian side or it will be on the American side. Sorry, Omer, can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you. I'm listening to you as with a lot of interest, because I want because this will lead to my next question. So please go ahead.
So because I got cut off the last time, I wasn't certain.
No. You're being understood properly.
So here's what we have, right? We have a very interesting India right now. We have an India which wants to maintain its relationships with Russia. We have an India that has ceded land to China in its Think East policy. It's looking to become a regional power within Asia, and yet we know that it can only happen if that India continues to get support from the USA. But because of international situations, because of the way things are, because of the kind of exploitation that India has been consistently doing of the Muslims and of other minorities, it is losing favor with the West, with the USA. It is losing favor with the Arab countries, where every once in a while some prince or princess speaks up against the Indian treatment of Muslims, even though it's done on a low level. But slowly these things will start to gain more momentum. And India will have to make some very difficult choices. India is in that state now where it has played every side, it has played itself well, but now it must choose a side. And when it comes to that, it is going to inevitably brush off a lot of people within India the wrong way. There will be a lot of resistance, and when that resistance happens, then we can expect harder crackdowns.
You talk of resistance, and when that happens, the inevitable could happen, which includes implosion, which also includes genocide. We've had Dr. Stanton, who's the head of Genocide Watch, who's openly talked about the massacre of 200 million plus Muslims if the situation continues as it is. He has also already said that the genocide has begun within India, specifically referring to Indian illegally occupied Jammu and Kashmir, but also within India as well. Is India heading towards a point of no return? Short answer.
It would appear that it is, yes. I think the kind of judgments that have come out from the Indian courts, because we have to look at all three wings. We have so the Indian army is of course brutal as it is with the Kashmiris. The government is very clear. The political parties, the executive and the political parties, all of them are clear. The last remaining ray of hope for any country, and a country like India, which is a common law country, is the courts. Now, when we hear judgments, for instance, a recent judgment which said that a court allowing Hindu worshippers to pray in Muslim mosque courtyards because once again there was some ancient Hindu temple beneath that. When we see a repeat of all of these things consistently happening, we know for a fact that there is the entire governmental structure on one side, and then there is only one option left for an oppressed minority, which is to start an armed resistance. And if that were to happen, that would, of course, unfortunately have a fallout effect on Pakistan as well. It's not something that I would want to happen. I wouldn't want India to go through an armed resistance. I would hope that they can see the light and figure things out. But it looks increasingly certain that that is the route that India is taking for itself.
All right, thank you very much, Safiullah Khan Ghauri, a political analyst, who have joined us and who have talked to us about the current situation as far as Indian illegally occupied Jammu and Kashmir is concerned, with the illegal detention of the religious scholars that has happened there. And of course, Pakistan has strongly denounced that. This said, the way and the manner in which India is moving towards a point of no return is something that should be extremely worrying for the powers that be, especially in the West. And some kind of pressure tactic needs to be imposed on India so that it reverts some of its policies towards its minorities, especially Muslims, before it's way too late for the country that is India. And of course, as Safi said, it's going to have an impact not only on India but also on neighboring countries such as Pakistan. Let's come to our last three stories very quickly. The first concerns the emotional appeal as far as the United Nations General Assembly is concerned for the girls' education and the women's rights. Now, after pleading with world leaders at the United Nations to protect the education and the rights of women in Afghanistan, Somia Faruqi, who was the former captain of the Afghan girls robotics team, broke down in tears backstage. She urged them to unite and demand the reopening of girls' school and protection of their rights. It has been 1 year that the educational institutions have been closed within Afghanistan, and no light is in sight as far as when and how these educational institutions will be reopened. A lot of speculation occurs within other countries of the world because of that very fact. And the emotional appeal that has been made at the United Nations General Assembly by Somia, let's see what kind of impact it makes. Somaya, what kind of impact it has on the different countries that could ask or request Afghanistan to reconsider the way it has been treating education for girls within its country. Then let's come to Islamophobia. Islamophobia is nothing new. This is the fear of Islam. But what is surprising, well, not surprising really, is that more than 55% of the Islamophobic content that is posted online comes from within India. This was a study that has been published by the Islamic Council of Victoria. It found a strong correlation between spikes in hate and newsworthy events related to Islam, particularly protests, terrorist attacks and eruptions of conflict in the Muslim world. The study that found nearly 4 million anti-Muslim posts were made during a 24-month period between 2017 and 2019. And of course, they are all related to other remarks made by leaders of India's BJP against Muslim protesters of the CAA, that is the Citizenship Amendment Act. The fact that is not surprising is the fact that it comes from India, also because the way hate is emanated or being pushed by the Indian authorities and the Hindu majority leaders towards its citizens as far as the different minorities, especially the Muslims, are concerned. Whether it will result in some kind of an action against those who are responsible for promoting Islamophobia from India remains to be seen. And finally, ladies and gentlemen, today, after all of this discontent that is happening across our region, especially in India, we come to the International Day of Peace that is being observed across the world today. According to the United Nations, this day the theme is End Racism and Build Peace. So important in the context of Indian illegally occupied Jammu and Kashmir and so many other places across the world. The United Nations General Assembly has declared this a day that is devoted to strengthening of the ideals of peace through observing 24 hours of non-violence and ceasefire. What it says, quote unquote, and I'd like to end the show with this, is that racism continues to poison institutions, social structures and everyday life in every society. It continues to be a driver of persistent inequality. We cannot, as a nation, as a world that is filled with different religions, sects and of course forms of society, to have an inequality and a rise in inequality or a rise in activities against other sects or religions. We need to have interfaith harmony. We need to understand each other as a society, as a nation and as a world. And that is what this International Day of Peace is all about. With that, we come to an end of today's newsroom. Ladies and gentlemen, we'll see you inshallah tomorrow with news stories and segments that pertain to us, you and Pakistan. A lot of people are affected by the floods, ladies and gentlemen. Kindly help them in whichever way you can, either by donating to the Prime Minister's or the government's funds, or to the armed forces funds, or through the NGOs, or through the different philanthropists that are helping those in need. But do help. Allah Hafiz.